Okay. All right. Richard Meredith is a native of Flint, Michigan. Rick came to Rick came to California with the Navy, and except for a brief respite in Kansas City, has remained. With undergraduate and graduate degrees in biology, he worked for 35 years as a wildlife biologist and marine scientist. His first novel, Sky Dance, was based on his eco-restoration experiences in the Amazon rainforests of Ecuador. His second novel, The Crow's Nest, drew heavily on his work on commercial tuna seiners, right? I had to look that, seiners, okay. I did not know how to say that word, in the Pacific. He is currently working on a series of stories about a San Francisco homicide detective who, though a brilliant investigator, is hobbled by serious self-doubt and social anxiety. And I'm looking forward to those. So, Rick, I will let you take it away.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for showing up tonight. And I'm especially happy that my friend and neighbor, Ann DeVigo, is our speaker tonight. To talk about her novel, The Bakersfield Boys Club. Welcome, Ann.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Rick.
I wanted to, before we start, I want to talk about a little how I met Ann. This is really one of those, once in a lifetime. But Carol and I, my wife and I, were flying from Sacramento to Burbank to catch a flight to Nashville, to go to Killer Nashville last year. And I noticed Ann sitting at the airport in Sacramento. And then when we got to Burbank, she was also at the same gate to go to Nashville. And I said to Carol, my wife says, what a coincidence. 3 of us are flying to Nashville today from Sacramento, Well, fast forward about 5 hours, and I'm at the cocktail party at, just before at the start of the conference. And I look across the room and there's Ann. So I run over there and I say, weren't you on the flight from Burbank or Sacramento? She says, yeah, I noticed you too. Your wife had those glittery tennis shoes. I was really impressed with them. So we got to talking, and she was there because she was a finalist for the Silver Falchion for the thriller category. And I said, well, I'm here for the action adventure category. And we thought that was a coincidence. Then I said, where are you from? And she said, well, I live in Curtis Park. She lives 5 blocks from me. And I thought,
maybe we all need to move to that neighborhood.
I know. So it immediately made me think of the words of the comedian, Stephen Wright, who said, it's a small world, but I'd still hate to paint it. So anyway, Ann, could you go ahead and just give us a little brief bio and a little bit about your experience and your life and all that, please?
Well, thanks, Rick. I was a journalist for a long, long time. I started out in a little tiny paper in Paso Robles, California. It was a 5-day paper, and I was the copy girl, which meant I went and I tore the stories off the teletype, you guys, and brought them to the editor. If it was a good story. If it was a bad story, I'd hang it up on a nail beside the teletype machine because I knew he didn't want it. And the worst thing that ever happened to me on that job was that I hung up the story that President Nixon had relaxed trade barriers with Red China, which was probably one of the biggest stories of that decade. And so that was my introduction to journalism, but actually it got better after that. I went on to work for weeklies and then a little 5-day daily. And then eventually came to Sacramento and worked at the Sacramento Union. Went back when there were 2 papers in this town. Mm-hmm. But I freelanced for a lot of different newspapers as well. I freelanced for the Boston Globe and Ms. Magazine. And then when I worked at the legislature, I was a ghostwriter for members, some of whom had my pieces in the Wall Street Journal. So, and then I worked in state government for a while doing PR. So that's what. And now I have, my job is, but my fun job is writing thrillers.
Yeah. Well, you do a good job. For those of you who haven't read it, I urge you, a little product placement here. I urge you to read Bakersfield Boys Club because I've read it twice, and it's a little bit unsettling story about sexual exploitation of teenage boys and girls by the club, which is a group of predatory and untouchable civic leaders. I kind of teased Anne as what I call an uncozy. But Anne is truly a craftswoman. I'll tell you, her skill and experience as a journalist shine through. And though it's a gritty tale, it's flows like poetry. And Anne does not pull any punches when she's writing. So can you give us just a little short synopsis of the story without giving away too much? I don't know how many people, I should have said this before when we began, but we kind of really like everyone to mute and to get off the on video too, or how do you say that? Anyway, but just go ahead and give us a little short synopsis of the story.
Yeah, it's 1978 in Bakersfield, California. And Suzanne Ricci is a gal who grew up in the difficult oil fields of Taft, California, and she had a hard life, but she is now a widow, and she's raising her 14-year-old son, Danny. Suzanne finds the stabbed and beaten body of her neighbor, Reggie, but also at the scene, she finds evidence that Danny may have been there at the all-male party where the murder occurred. The police investigation widens, and Danny is under suspicion, but he is sheltered by a group of very powerful men in Bakersfield who abuse young people. And Suzanne has to put everything at stake. She puts her home, her job, and even a new love in order to save her son.
Your experience as a crime reporter, and how'd that help you write the story?
Well, and I'll give you a little background here, Rick, which is that I covered the courts for a while, and the genesis of this story came from a case that I covered when I was in Bakersfield. But I think being a journalist in some ways is a big plus, and in other ways you have to overcome it, which is it's a very just the facts, man, kind of business. So you are writing not your opinion or not somebody else's feelings, but what the facts are. And so it allowed me to be to write in a very quick way. I could write quickly, and but when I started writing fiction, I found that it was very difficult for me to write about people's feelings, and so I had to really work at that to actually get to the point where I was writing not just about the facts, not just about the events, but about the character and about the character's feelings. So I think that was both of the positive things about being a journalist and also the negatives.
Well, the plot was really, really compelling. I did a lot of work down in the Taft and the Bakersfield and the oil field areas there, and it is a hard scrabble life. And I could feel the repressive heat, the suffocating smell of sulfur in the air and the arid landscapes throughout. But I really enjoyed the characters, especially Suzanne. That woman carried more baggage than a porter at Union Station. How she was devastated to learn about the secret life of her husband and then the secret life of her son. Can you talk a little bit about Danny and about Suzanne and Danny, and were those characters fictional or based on someone in real life?
When I started on the story, the story is based on an infamous series of murders that happened in Bakersfield from late 1978 through the 80s, and then the final murder occurred in the early 2000s. And in order to make the book move fairly quickly, I compressed the events so that they occurred all in about a year. And to do that, and also to pull the story together, because there are many, there are several different murders, and not all of them included the same people. I created Suzanne and Danny to pull the whole book together and have a character arc for those two people. But many of the things that happened to to Suzanne and Danny. Some of those events occurred for the real, for real people that were involved in those murders, either as victims or as parents or as defendants in the murder cases. But Suzanne and Danny are both made up characters. And as I wrote about them, I got very attached to the two of them. Suzanne, I was a journalist, and Suzanne's a freelancer, down in Bakersfield, working to keep her house from being foreclosed on. And Danny is a very appealing young man. At least for me, he was. He's artistic. He's funny. He's committed to his friends. He doesn't let his friends go. He'll go to bat for his friends. And so I got very attached to those folks. So Suzanne and Danny, while several of the events that happened to them also happened to real people, they are made up characters to pull the story together.
Well, on that subject, did you ever meet any of the real people from that murder series at all?
Well, several of the people in the book are inspired, I should say, by real people. One of the DA, in Bakersfield that was eventually murdered has some similarities to Vincent in the story. And the editor and part owner of the newspaper was inspired by the man who actually hired me at the newspaper and was later found to be one of the members of the powerful group of men that were abusing young people. And several other characters in the book were also inspired by real people, including Grace, who was a girl who was murdered probably by one of the men that was in the story. So while they're not faithful recreations, though they are inspired by real people, and people in Bakersfield, they know who they were. It was kind of funny. I went down to Bakersfield for a book club about a month ago, and before I went to down to Bakersfield for the book club, I did an interview on the radio with a talk show guy. And he was asking me about the people I knew and from Bakersfield. And he said, and one of the people in the story was murdered and in real life. And that man went to prison, and he was out of prison. And the talk show host said, "Oh yeah," he says, "I ran into Chris Hillis the other day." Chris was the guy that murdered the DA. And I said, "Oh, okay." And the radio talk show host said, "Chris, nicest guy you'd ever want to meet." And I think that's Bakersfield for you.
Yeah.
The guy is out of prison, and the talk show host says, "Nicest guy you'd ever want to meet."
He was a very quiet neighbor, yeah.
Yeah. So Bakersfield is a strange place.
Yeah. Well, there was speaking of Danny, there was a real sweetness and innocence and joy in Danny's relationship with Grace, and kind of just the opposite with Reno. And in one case, Grace is kind of taking care of Danny, and then Danny's trying to take care of Reno. But you want to talk a little bit about Grace and Reno, because they're pretty important characters.
Well, Grace was taken from a real girl who died during those years involving the Bakersfield Boys Club cases. And after the book was published, I had someone from Bakersfield send me a message and said, do you know, because the murder of Grace was never really solved. They know that it was that the police commissioner was probably involved in it. She was at his house at a party when she disappeared and later was found thrown dead along the highway. But the person that wrote to me said, in your research for this book, did you ever find out anything more about the murder of Grace? You know, that wasn't her name. Her name was Dana, the real girl. And I said, no, other than talking to her, the lawyer for the family, who was, you know, just as bewildered as anybody else about what really happened to her. I have no more information, but this is like 4 decades later. And one of her friends wrote me, you know, a note to say, do you know anything more about my friend? So it was very moving. And I think, you know, the fact that she, you know, died and someone left her along the highway was just so moving that I just had to I just felt for her and felt for the person that she was then.
You know, that came through in the book, you know, quite well, you know, that being found outside the road by that, by the biker, you know, that's going to,
yeah.
And Reno is interesting because, you know, his mother, I mean, he's this 13-year-old who's being pimped out by his mother, you know, who's an addict, and interesting character.
Reno is also a real person, was inspired by a real person. And he was later convicted for murder of one of his abusers and sentenced to prison. He remained in prison for 38 years, and after the book was published, he was released. It just is so, it is so hard to even talk about that a boy who was, you know, who was abused as a young person, you know, to the point where he killed one of his abusers, spent all that time in prison, you know, and none of his abusers were ever charged, ever spent a day in jail, never, or, you know, ever went to court. But anyway, he's now suing the county, Kern County, and the city of Bakersfield, and the Catholic Church, who ran the boys' home where he was incarcerated for a while. And I think he has a good case.
Yeah. Interesting.
I think he has a good case.
Hey, Rick and Anne, whenever you feel is a good time for a few questions, I'm sure we'll have more as this wonderful conversation progresses, but just let me know.
Okay, anytime.
Okay, the court scenes were very well written. Did you cover court as a journalist? Yes,
I did. And the first of the murders, it was a beauty salon operator who was murdered. And while somebody was charged, no, he was not convicted, and there's never been any follow-up to that case either. But yeah, I covered that case, and I was covering courts at the time in Bakersfield. And I covered courts there for a couple of years, including, you know, some of the strangest cases you'll ever want to run across happen in Bakersfield.
Gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. But then when I came to Sacramento, I also covered courts for a while here in Sacramento, and was involved in a kind of an infamous lawsuit involving someone who, a lawyer who wanted my notes from a confidential witness that I had. So yeah, I did cover courts, and it's fascinating. It's a fascinating job covering courts, as long as you don't get too mired down in the details about this motion and that motion and so on. So, but there are some great stories there, and some very heartrending stories as well.
No, I can imagine. And then another question is, I'd like a bit more background on the real case and what your entry point to the real story was.
The Lords of Bakersfield, they're called the Lords of Bakersfield cases. There are at least 6 or 7 cases, and they all involved young people that were abused by powerful men in the city and county down there. And it started in 1978. The first, and I covered the first of the murder cases. It was the murder of as I mentioned, the murder of a man who owned a hair salon that catered to the wealthy women of Bakersfield. The man was involved with a 13-year-old who was kind of in and out of his shop, and the 13-year-old probably was there at the time that he had a party at his house, and he was discovered by the gardener the next day, and a young man a young college student was arrested but never convicted. And in the background of that case was the 13-year-old who may or may not have been at the scene. And the cases went on from there to include the police commissioner, a wealthy businessman, a lawyer in town, and the county personnel director, who was murdered by the 13-year-old, who by that time was 17. And the final case involving that was a case in which the assistant district attorney of Kern County was murdered by the father of a boy that the district attorney had abused over a period of a number of years. So all those cases, and none of those people, those abusers, were ever brought to trial, but the boys were, and many of them spent years in prison. Some of them are now out and have disappeared.
Oh, that's heart-wrenching.
It is, because it's in the trial of the 13-year-old. It was moved out of Kern County and moved on to Riverside. And at the time, in the court records, there is testimony from the 13-year-old's probation officer. And instead of going, to someone saying, this boy is in serious trouble when he was 13, somebody needs to take care of him and put him in a safe environment. Instead of doing that, she told the court that, you know what I told him? I told that boy that he ought to stop using people. That's what she told the court, and it's in the court records. It just is almost, it's hard to even imagine. Nothing was ever done. He even named all the people that all the abusers, who included the man who hired me for my job at the Californian, who was part owner of the paper, and a very powerful political figure in Bakersfield, who was the finance director for the state assemblyman and the police commissioner. It was just unforgivable, really.
I have a few more questions, but yeah, let's take a break from the questions and let Rick get on with the interview.
Well, that was actually kind of anticipated my next question, because I said the part of the story that angered me the most was the manipulation of the legal system to actually enslave Dan and the other boys. And
Yes.
the frustration that Suzanne experienced when everyone, the police, the FBI, the grand jury, the press, all turned a blind eye. And my question was, did that happen in the real case? And I think, yeah, it did, from what you just explained.
Well, I had Suzanne go to the district attorney and also go to the FBI, and those things were not part of, as far as I know. I think someone did go to the Attorney General's office, but nothing ever happened. But I wanted Suzanne to do everything possible. Yeah. And parents did. They did do everything possible. They went to court to try and get back custody, of their kids, and it didn't happen.
Could I impose on you to read maybe a couple of passages so people can get a flavor for the story?
Sure, sure. And I just want to show you guys, this is my bookmark, Jim's book. Okay, here we go. January 1978. In the yard, the neighborhood cat cries. Suzanne leans against the kitchen sink and squeezes her eyes shut. She'd swallowed a Valium last night to sleep, and now the animal's yowling feels like a needle in her brain. She calls up the back stairs. Danny, have you been feeding that cat? There's no answer. Maybe he's jogging with his friend Kristen. The wailing begins again, this time right up against the back door. When she opens it, the cold air surges in, damp and stinking of oil vapor expelled from the refineries. The cat trots out inside, pale gray hair standing on end. It's Narcissus, her neighbor Reggie's Siamese. Out! Shoo! Electricity from the animal's fur tickles her ankle. She uses her bare foot to nudge it toward the open door. That's when she notices the print on the linoleum. 4 toes and a broad, fleshy pad. Dark red. Her stomach lurches, imagining a dead rat or a gutted squirrel lying on the porch. She creeps outside, slipping on the fog-wet concrete. There's no body. Instead, a trail extends paw by paw down the porch steps and across the patio to the hole in the fence. Narcissus rubs a flank against Suzanne's robe as if urging her on, but she can't move. Cold penetrates the soles of her feet and chills the tip of her nose. She hitches up her robe and climbs onto the porch's retaining wall. Over the fence in Reggie's backyard, the kidney-shaped swimming pool is covered in gray plastic. The terrace is bare of furniture. It's easy to see the paw prints. They trail across the flagstones to the landing at the top of the steps. Fed by a trickle from the house, a bloody pool has formed by the door. It glistens in the fog.
So it begins.
Yeah.
I love your style. Is there a favorite writer or several that have influenced you? Because I really enjoy your style.
Well, I'll have to admit that Scott Turow is one of my absolute favorites. Yeah. When I first read Presumed Innocent, I was really, really hooked on writing mystery stories. He did such a terrific job in that. And of course, at that time, I was a court reporter too. So that definitely made me interested in because he can do courtroom scenes like nobody else. But he also had great characters in his books too. And there are always some terrific twists. So I've continued to be a fan of Scott Turow, but right now I'm pretty hooked on Tana French. Tana French writes mysteries set in Ireland, and they are dynamite. I mean, she's done some very, very good ones. Her most recent one is called The Searcher, which is very, very good.
Excellent. Karen, there's some other questions out there that you want to?
Yes, and by the way, I'm reading The Searcher as well. It's very, very
it's a
dark.
good,
yeah.
And
twisty. She takes her times writing. Sorry, she takes her times writing books, though. I wish she wrote more. Tana French. I wait anxiously for every one of her books.
Well, I think she does such a great job, though. You kind of have to let her do it in her own good time.
One of the questions is, as a journalist, you saw a lot of the worst of humanity. How did you compartmentalize to keep the dark stuff you had to cover from affecting you?
It was hard, and sometimes, and when I covered the police beat here in Sacramento for a while, and I think probably the worst was when I had 3 double murders in 1 week, and it was very, very difficult. But you also ran into some of the most wonderful people. You just ran into really amazing, amazing people as well. People that are giving and wonderful and have stories to tell. I guess that was one of the things that I loved about being a journalist, was that everybody has a story and everybody has a wonderful story. And I'm always telling people, write your story. Because, I mean, everybody has a fantastic and wonderful story to tell, whether it's something that happened to them, something they heard from somebody, a story that their grandmother told them about something. And so, it's one of the things I always tell people is write your story, because people do have amazing stories. And, I ran into wonderful people as well while I was doing journalism. And you just run into things that you just feel you just have to write about. And the Bakersfield story was one of those.
I have 3 more questions.
Okay.
How did you learn to make the switch from just the facts journalistic writing approach to fiction?
I think one of the ways I did it was by joining a writers group. And you sure do get a lot of great feedback. And that was, I started my own writers group, but before that, I was in another writers group, and now I'm in a critique group, and they'll come at you in a very loving, but in an understanding way. But they're saying, I have no idea what your character's motivations are. What is she feeling in this scene? Or, does she feel like this? Or does he feel like that? Is he angry? Is he happy? And so as people gave me feedback, I realized that I needed to put that in, just keep going on that, keep putting in what they're feeling, how they're feeling, what they want, what is it they want out of this? There's a wonderful writer down in Fresno who, really comes up with, the tough love sort of feedback, and it's very, very helpful. But that's what she says, what does this person want? And so that's what I think got me into like opening up and realizing that just the fact isn't going to do the job.
Good, great answer. Were the newspapers reporting on the abuse?
Not until like the mid to late 80s. And then they talked about the murders in more detail, but it wasn't till the assistant district attorney was murdered in the early 2000s that the paper actually waded in and really, really went into it. And they did a huge series on it that won national prizes. At that point, though, the part owner of the paper that hired me had died of AIDS. He died of AIDS back in the mid 90s, and so by that time he was dead. And so,
I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
And that's what I think. It's what kind of opened up the newspaper to actually, write the story right down to the nitty gritty.
During that time, or when you were doing research for the book, did you ever feel in danger? Were you ever threatened?
No, because almost all those guys were dead by that time.
Okay.
But when the boy called me, who is now, he's now 38. He's in his almost 60. When he called me, we talked on the phone and we corresponded back a little bit, but I was very cautious because he'd spent 38 years in prison. He'd been addicted to drugs while he was in prison, and he'd had a mental breakdown. And I just thought, I want to be very careful.
Yeah.
So
oh, go ahead.
Yeah, and at the time when I was in Bakersfield, the police were not the nicest people in the world to me. I was careful.
Interesting.
Other than, oh, I'm sorry, other than Reno, the character Reno, what you're talking about, have there been any other reforms or repercussions as a result of the case locally, do you know, that you know of?
Well, he has filed this huge suit, and I think he has a good case. But other than that, and the DA getting murdered, and the parent that murdered him was an investigator at the DA's office.
Wow.
Yeah, and he went to prison, and now he's out. I don't know what he's doing now. But apparently he's okay, because somebody said he was the nicest guy I'd ever want to meet. So it was interesting when I went down to Bakersfield. A gal came up to me and she bought a couple of books, and she said that her husband was retired now, but he'd been a CHP officer down in Bakersfield during that era, and he knew about a lot of this and never said anything.
Well, that's the politics are really interesting in the story too, how they elected DA Smithson, who was the real political animal, but he was so easily manipulated by Vincent, who was his assistant DA, who was also, I think he was actually the head of the club. And I kept wondering, what Vincent had on the DA that he could easily manipulate him so much, but that was.
When I did some interviews for the book back in the writing stage, I talked to the attorney that represented the family of the girl who died. And so we chatted for a while, and I asked him what he thought about the DA, and he said, well, and the fact that the police commissioner was never charged at the time. The DA said, oh, well, we're not going to charge him. And he said that the assistant DA, the one who was involved with the club, was the one who was on the charging committee that decided that he should not be charged.
How convenient.
Yeah, and this was from the attorney for the family.
Yeah. Another relationship I really liked was the arc of, between Suzanne and Officer Lisa Theus. Can you talk a little bit about that betrayal?
Well, back when I was there and during that era, there were no women police officers. There were women community outreach officers, but there are no women police officers. And, so I made, and I think I believe that the first women police officer just coming on about that same time. And so I thought it would be interesting to have her, be very interested in getting a promotion. Because women did not get promoted very much back then. They were like, oh yeah, we'll send you out to talk to the widows and orphans, like that. And so I thought it would be interesting to have her be an ambitious woman, who at that point was willing to do a lot in order to get a promotion and to detective. And so that's why I created her. And women, even back in those times, they didn't have it easy. That was about the same time that women were first admitted to be officers at the California Highway Patrol and a lot of other jurisdictions, police and law enforcement jurisdictions all over. So that's kind of why I put her in that position, and because it was kind of a formative time for women starting out, and she didn't handle it all that well.
So much for sisterhood on that one.
Well, yeah, for that one, but at the very end, she came through. And
she did. That was a good arc. That was To explain a little bit, Lisa kind of took care of Suzanne when Suzanne's husband was killed in a car crash, and she kind of mothered her through the system, and then they became friends, and then not so good friends. Yeah, so I won't talk about more than that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, she was a character that I think maybe a lot of officers would have some sympathy for. They might not do that themselves, but they might have sympathy for her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, another thing I wanted to ask you about was speaking of Carlos, who was Suzanne's husband, who was killed. Can I tell who he was killed with, or do you think that's too much?
Oh yeah, sure.
Okay, he was killed with his girlfriend, and Suzanne knew nothing about it. But then without his dad, one is left to wonder how Danny would have, how the men in Danny's life influenced him, because he seemed enamored by Reggie, who was the guy who was murdered in the beginning, and his next door neighbor, and was kind of he was the guy who was grooming Danny.
Mm-hmm.
And the only real other men in his life at that point were his uncles, and except for Uncle Lucky, the rest they were nothing. They were
kind of knuckleheads. They were redneck knucklehead guys, but they worked in the oil fields, and they came. I won't say anything about where they came from anyway. But Lucky is a great guy, and I really like Lucky. I mean, he's a recovering alcoholic, but he's just a nice guy. He's just a nice guy that's willing to see Danny for the person that he is.
Yeah.
And I like, Lucky. I might even fall for Lucky.
He was very accepting, and
Yeah.
he was very supportive. And,
a nice guy.
I thought before we take another question, I wanted to indulge in a few of my favorite lines from the book. And
Okay.
And I had about a page and a half, but Karen said, get it down to 5 or 6, But in describing, there was Reggie had taken this photo of Danny with these short shorts on, and in describing the expression on Danny's face in the photo, it was, he had a rich bitch purse of his lips. I thought, I like that, rich bitch purse of his lips. And I fancy we were talking about Danny's uncles and cousins, but two of Danny's older cousins beat him up for being gay. And Anne's description is great. He felt their weight, their heavy muscles and solid bones, the burden of their hatred. And I love that line. Another one was, the day drags like a club foot. Or a juicy anger flows through her. And Danny's face is a landscape of contempt. And then in describing the boys at the youth facility, Suzanne observes, there's darkness, a black well of suffering in the boys. And there are many more, but you got to dig them out for yourself. Any questions you got there?
I do. I just love that, all those descriptions. That'll really make people want to read the book to find out more of those little gems. The question is, we have forever to create our first book, but then the fans want more. Do you have other stories you want to tell?
Well, I wrote, this is my second thriller. I wrote one that was released in 2017, I think, that was actually inspired by a clipping that my mother sent me back in the 90s from the New York Times about the murders of 2 men and 3 cows in her little town in New York State where she grew up. And so I decided to, finally, when I retired and started writing books, I decided I pulled that clipping out and wrote a book about, and saw, my own idea of what the mystery, solving the mystery. And that was really a fun one to do. And I went back and did a lot of research and included a lot of details from my family who had homesteaded that area back in the 1850s. So that was kind of fun. And then I'm on a second draft of a new one that I think is going to be called Presumed Dead. I wrote a little note to all, my list of supporters and folks, and I said, I am working on a new one and it's called Presumed Innocent, which of course is the name of Scott Turo's book, not the name of Anne Vigo's new book, which is Presumed Dead. So anyway, Presumed Dead. And it's about a judge who is trying her first murder case. And as the murder case progresses, she finds it more and more difficult to overcome a secret crime that happened to her back years before. And the perpetrator of that crime comes back to haunt her as the trial progresses. And so that one's, it's kind of, as I say, it's a hot mess right now, but I should have it out by fall, I think. Anyway, it's going to be a really fun one. And fun in the context of being a good thriller. So I'm really excited about it. And I'm very excited about the character who's a judge. And I sat in, going to court and listening to judges and what they say and how they do it and how they comport themselves and what their challenges and issues are. And so that's been interesting. And I have called upon my husband, who's a lawyer, from time to time. He says he's a consultant.
Paid or unpaid?
Oh, definitely unpaid. Unless you count cooking dinner.
Yeah. Well, on that subject, can you tell us a little bit about your process? Are you, are you 8 hours a day?
Oh gosh, I'll have to admit, you guys, I'm really in awe of all these people who say, I just get right up and at 5 o'clock and I write. I am the most undisciplined writer you can imagine. And, what I do is I get up and I goof around all morning, or, not necessarily goofing around. I might take a walk, go to the gym, read my email. And then about 1 o'clock, I think, well, if I don't start right now, I'm not going to get anything done today. So then I sit down and my old reporter instincts come back and I sit down and I type away as fast as I can for about 3 hours until it's time for wine. So I'll have to admit that I'm not one of those real terrific disciplined writers. I just, I guess I go back to my old journalism, program, which was you go out and you gather stuff for the story, and then you come back to the office about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and you have to have it on the editor's desk by 5 o'clock. So that's kind of where, that's kind of how I do it nowadays.
You need a deadline, huh?
I do, yeah. Somebody's got to kind of give me no, I won't say those words. Anyway, somebody has to give me a push.
Yeah.
Get me going. And it's like, time's passing.
Karen, have you got any other questions? I'm about running out, but I want to give Anne an opportunity to read another passage if she has one.
Oh, that's a great idea. We do not have any questions at this time.
Okay, let me see if I can find it here.
I actually want to ask a question about, it's a little bit about Suzanne's, there's another arc about how Vincent, the DA, is taken care of in the end, and the symmetry with Suzanne's father's death, which is, I don't want to go any more into that, but that's real interesting little sidelight. Actually,
well, one of the things that's fun, I think, about writing a thriller, and you guys probably, guys who write thrillers know this, is that it's so much fun to do research because you talk to the most interesting people. You talk to fascinating people. I say, I need to find out about such and such. And so you talk to your friends and find out who knows something about this or that. And then you can sit down and, have coffee and chat with them. And it is so interesting. You meet fascinating people, I think. Okay. Here, well, you can see my husband going upstairs. He's sneaking upstairs, I think, with a package of cookies or something. I don't know what this is. He knows he's not getting any dinner tonight. Anyway, okay, here we are. This is Danny, and he's run into some problems with the law, and has been sentenced to a boys' home. And so I'll just read a little bit from this. The High Endeavor Group Home is not as advertised. Dutch Haig, that's his lawyer, assured Danny there would be school, activities, decent meals, a little freedom to walk to the park, say, or buy a burger at Wendy's. Not so. School is a half day of classes held at the group home's scarred dining room table. Danny and the 7 other wards are taught by a retired high school teacher with bristling chin hairs. The boys spend school hours dozing over their books, sticking ballpoint pens into their arms and faces to create homemade tattoos, or shooting each other with darts from straight pins. The 5-bedroom group home was once a fine residence, wainscoting and carved moldings, glass pane doors between the living room and the dining room, and golden oak floors inlaid with strips of mahogany. But years of misuse by teenage felons has downgraded the house to the status of an old man who's lost his teeth and now shows bare gums.
Yep.
The glass doors have been carted away, moldings stripped, floors gouged. 6 weeks after he arrived, Danny wakes up as usual to the resident counselor's shout, "Up, you slugs, inspection in 30. Danny hates that the meaty fist of a voice. He punches them out of bed, him and his roommate, Diego, a kid who sold a bundle of heroin to an undercover cop. Diego stirs. He's 12, and his face and arms as smooth and hairless as a newborn puppy. His mother died a couple of years ago when the 2 of them were sneaking across the border from Mexico. Diego lived with his uncle, but now the guy, a member of La M, is in Soledad prison. So the boys, Danny and his friend Reno sneak out. They're going to a party.
Yep.
Yeah, and
Well, one thing we didn't touch upon is really about Grace's father, Pete, and the relationship he had with Suzanne. But before we talk about, I think one of the things I really liked was Janet, or Janice, was Pete's wife, who kind of deserted he and Grace. She was a background singer for Merle Haggard. So we get into the honky tonks, and then the whole reason why Grace kind of got into her situation was she wanted to go on the road with her mother. And can you talk about? I don't want to talk too much about the trouble she got into. I think that's something for you to discuss.
well, country music that's part of Bakersfield, and it's kind of legendary being part of Bakersfield, but in truth, it is kind of woven into the fabric of Bakersfield. And Buck Owens, of course, came from there, and he built a big performance venue there in Bakersfield back in the 90s. I think it was in the 90s. But a lot of the country singers came from Bakersfield, and Merle Haggard was born and grew up there. And he says that his family lived in a converted railroad car. And so in the first draft of the book, I had several scenes with Merle Haggard in them, but in this one, Merle Haggard, there is a Merle Haggard concert.
Yeah.
In Bakersfield, and he writes some very touching stories, touching songs about Bakersfield. He and a lot of people came from the South, during the Depression, and worked in the oil fields, came from Texas and worked in the oil fields, or came up and worked in the cotton fields. Because back then, now a lot of it's planted in grapevines, but back in the 70s, it was still cotton. Cotton was still big, there in those days. And those songs are very touching. And, it's the Grapes of Wrath, place, but it was the Grapes of Wrath place. And and a lot of people are not far from there even now. A Sacramento writer that perhaps some of you know, named Shirley Stroud, her family were Okies, and grew up and came to Bakersfield back during those years. And she grew up in Bakersfield.
Yeah.
So it's a very interesting place. There's a lot of nuance there because of the people that came and grew up there. There's, the streets of Bakersfield. There's I think one of the best songs about Bakersfield is the song that Buck Owens and Dwight Yoakam do together, "Streets of Bakersfield." It's a great song.
Well, the definition of country music is 3 chords and the truth. And I think
That's not that, well, 3 chords and the truth, that's not too far away, because it is the truth, for a lot of those folks. Yeah. And there's some great songs that come out of there too.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But Pete and Suzanne have a relationship that is hot and heavy for a while, and but they both needed somebody. They both had such a loss, and it's just a very, very poignant relationship they have.
And I think during those times, people that are experiencing guilt and loss, and they are drawn to each other, and they can be very powerful help for each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they comes across. They both got a lot out of the relationship, but it wasn't more than it was. It was just that they needed to rescue each other for the time being, and so yeah.
I'm kind of attached to those guys.
Yeah,
I may write another book about them. I have an idea for one, but we'll see.
Yeah, you left it kind of open, so
Yeah.
But I like that the story ends in Sacramento. So they work their way up.
Who knows? You asked me a little while ago about how I get the ideas for my stories, and almost all of them start out with something, like covering the trial in Bakersfield Boys Club, and the newspaper clipping from my mother all those years ago that I knew it was a great story then, and I just put it in my file, and it just sat there and got yellowed for a long time before I pulled it out and decided to write a book about it. My new book, I got the idea for it when my husband's, he went down for a reunion of his law school class down in Santa Clara, and he came from a very small class. It was only 30 people in the class at that time, and they were sitting around eating dinner, and they were kind of swapping stories back and forth, and somebody said, whatever happened to Rick? And he was somebody that graduated with him, and somebody said, I think Rick got disbarred. And somebody else said, no. I think Rick went over to Las Vegas and the mafia murdered him. And I thought, is that a story or what?
Yeah.
And so, all right, okay. So Rick may appear in my new novel, Presumed Dead.
All right. I like that. You think we'll ever hear from Jade again?
I don't know.
Because she's
Jade is over, and she's having a good life over in
was it Morro Bay? I think she's Morro Bay.
wherever.
You know, she's that, you know, she was only in, you know, what, you know, very small, but she was that little spice, you know, that it was just right for the story, you know. I liked her character.
I think she was one of Grace's friends, and who knows?
Yeah, yeah.
Who knows?
Rick, I have a couple questions.
Please.
Okay, for most of us, writing is like a meditation, hours and hours of hard work with rare moments of joyful enlightenment. During your creation of Bakersfield Boys Club, did you ever experience flow, where the words felt like they were coming from some other place?
No, I don't. I know a lot of people feel that way about their writing, but I guess I'm not one of them. It just, you know, I just keep going. I think that's comes from my journalism background. I just keep going, and stuff just happens. I just keep going, and you know,
Okay.
something will pop up. But yeah, I just keep going.
Well, then the next question kind of works with that. Are you a pantser or a plotter?
Oh, I'm not much of a plotter, you guys.
Yeah.
I just start out with an idea, and I just figure out where it's going to go. And you know, sometimes it does surprise me, you know, where I go. But yeah, and I've tried to do it, because when you go to a writer's conference, a lot of the writers' conferences, it's all about, you know, doing a step chart or something like that. And I've tried doing that, and I always get really depressed and like, okay, I'm not doing it right somehow. So I find that when I just start and just sit down and start writing, that's how it happens. I'm a member of a writers group that writes from prompts, and lots of times I'll just take whatever prompt it is and put my character in it and just write away and see what happens. And many times those prompts will be included in the novel.
I have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Such a dark subject matter. How did you keep it from taking you over?
It was hard sometimes. And that's why I tried to create some characters, you know, that had some joy or some happiness. I think the part that really meant the most to me was when, you know, was when Suzanne really realized that Danny was gay and that she had to help him make a life for himself. I just knew that somehow Danny was going to get through it. And that was something I just, you know, just came, and I just went with it, because I just wanted there to be some happiness too. And so I made sure that happened.
And I think that'd be a good, can you talk a little bit about, I thought it was a very good idea that when she took Danny to San Francisco to see gay people living happy lives, and not just, you know,
I think it was when I first went to work at the Sacramento Union was almost at exactly the time when Harvey Milk was killed and the Moscone were killed down in San Francisco. And I went down and did a series on San Francisco for the paper. And I talked to a lot of gay folks down there and really got a feel for the gay culture down there in the, you know, in the 70s. And it was a vibrant place there. It was before AIDS. And it was a pretty exciting and vibrant place for people then. Yeah.
yeah. Well, it was Danny's only real positive experience, you know, with his gayness, because
being gay in Bakersfield was was a really bad thing back in those days. And
Or he's being exploited for being gay, there was a time, and I think you described how he was, smiling at the other guys, and there were people his own age, and it was just, it was a poignant, again.
And even now, even 40 years later, you guys, it's tough.
Yeah.
Anyway, I did want to let you guys know that I'd love to put you on my contacts list. And if you go to the chat, my email is there, and you can email me with your email, and I'll let you know, give you an update on when my next book comes out. And so I'd love to have your name if you are interested in getting an update on Presumed Dead.
Yeah. Well, if there aren't any other questions, I want to thank you again, Ann. It was, I highly recommend the Bakersfield Boys Club to all who haven't read it. It's
Thank
provocative,
you.
emotionally charged, and well crafted. The plot is compelling. The array of characters never disappoints. And Ann's flair for description drops you in the middle of every scene. So thank you very much, Ann, and we really appreciate you talking to us today.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say, go ahead. Sorry, I'm interrupting, but I was just going to say everyone could turn on their cameras back on, and we could all see each other. People
okay.
might have some
That'd be
questions in
great,
person
yeah.
even too.
That would be
Yeah.
terrific. I'd love that.
Yeah, to see everybody, because I know we've been hiding.
Yeah,
take back
Penny
my
had a
ending.
question.
Yeah.
Is she?
Oh,
Oh, she went
Yeah, I'm
away.
right here. I'm
Oh,
right
there
here.
she is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I turned Sarah into a nun. I don't know what's going on with our.
We're on the Capital Crime. It's on the Capital
Yes.
Crimes account. Yeah.
But it didn't used to be. I mean, first it said capital crimes, and then it let me have a separate picture,
Yeah.
the nun picture, and now it's doing both. So change it back to capital crimes if you can. I'll try. Okay, so Anne.
Yeah.
I have such admiration for you as a writer, and I just wondered if you would share with us what your proudest moment so far has been as a writer. What has been your proudest moment? I know you haven't had the ultimate yet. That's still ahead of you, but up to this point, what has been your proudest moment?
I was on a Zoom call right after the book came out, and it was through the Renaissance Society at Sac State, and there were, I guess 70 or 80 people on the Zoom call, and one of the people there was a man who, when he was 12, went to one of the parties that the Bakersfield Boys Club people put on. And he wasn't, someone, saved him from that. I mean, he wasn't abused, but it gave me goosebumps. And I was just really proud of the fact that I'd written the book, and to give some recompense and some clarity to the ones that weren't saved, to the ones that didn't come out just fine. It was a hard moment, but I was glad that there was someone there that stood up for them. Yeah. And I was proud that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Anne. Thank you.
Are those articles up, like the 2000s ones where they revealed some of this stuff?
You know what I'll do?
Or-
I'm about to put out another newsletter, and I will include some links that you guys can look at if you'd like to.
Yeah, if you send them to me, I can send them out to everybody in the group here.
Okay. I'll do
Yeah,
that.
no, that would be wonderful, because I don't know anything about this, but it's just so upsetting, you know,
is.
that,
Yeah,
and so was it just cathartic a little bit to change
It
the
was.
reality?
it was, yes, because, you know, I hate to say that, you know, the book was somewhat more upbeat than some of the things that really happened.
Mhm.
And as as Rick says, it was, you know, it's not a waltz through the daisies to read the story, but it is very powerful.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'll do that. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, no, that would be great. I can send those out to everybody because I am curious. I don't know that much about it.
Yeah.
And we're
I'll do that.
learning, yeah.
So we can,
So-
so we can do some
and-
fact checking on a novel, huh?
I
Do you
just
think it might
think
be
this,
worthwhile to share it with the people who signed up, who
Yeah.
might not have gotten the link to be able to come, Sarah?
I think 90%, I sent it to everyone who registered. So
Okay,
it'll
okay.
automatically go out to everyone who registered, which is mostly, I think we had really truly most of the people who registered came. So yeah,
Okay,
we're good.
Okay, good.
You know,
Yeah.
it was such an honor to be featured by the Cat Crimes Book Club. I just want to thank you all very, very much.
We're excited.
Thank you.
We need to give a plug to your book cover.
Oh, yeah.
Karen, doo-doo-doo-doo. Yay, Karen.
Yes, beautiful book cover.
Yeah, it was an amazing.
There we go.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
outdid herself on this one. Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we're so thrilled to have you.
She's blushing, I can tell.
Yeah.
It's high.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, thank you, everyone.
You know, just before you go, I just thought of a second category or third category, which is kind of describes me because you have the pantsers, the plotters, and then me. I'm a plotter. So what the
Plotter.
We all feel like that sometimes, I think.
Mhm. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Well, we're excited, and you said you may have some other things in the works. We'll see what happens, right? And
Yeah. So we'll see.
all right. And I'll get you, yeah. And everybody, I think people put their emails in the chat, but I'm not sure. Should they email you with your email? Is that the best way to get on your newsletter, or do you have a website?
If they put their email in the chat, or if they just want to email me, either one or the other.
Okay.
We can, this is one of the few technical things I've figured out, because after the meeting, it automatically sends the chat to my email. So I can just forward the chat right to you,
Mhm.
and then you'll have everybody's
That'd be
email
wonderful.
addresses.
Okay.
Thank you, Penny.
Mhm.
Sure,
But
not a
do you
problem,
have a
Donna.
website too to get to your newsletter? Is that an
I do.
option? You do. Okay.
Yeah.
You have a website. Okay.
Okay.
Great job,
Yeah.
Ann. Thank you very much. It's a great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Very
you,
good.
Ann.
Thank you,
Thank
Anne.
you.
Good night, everybody.
Beautiful. Good
Good night.
night.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Where's that button?
All right.
Good job, Rick. Really,
Yes, really good job.
Yeah.
You are
Great job, Rick.
natural.
Yeah. I think we should do an hour of Michigan garage bands now. What do you think?
Yes, yeah. T-Garden and Van Winkle.
No. I've had enough.
I've been watching Mark Farner videos on YouTube. So.
Oh, yeah. No kidding. Great.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, you guys.
They got Curtis Mayfield, Sly and the Family Stone, and Crosby, Stills and Nash coming up in the next
Oh, slide
Those
them
I'll listen
down.
to.
stylistics. Let's see what else is on there. Oh yeah, all kinds of good stuff just for you.
So when I first got to Oakland, when I was in the Navy at the Naval Hospital in Oakland, that's just when Sly was coming out.
Oh gosh.
And who else? Oh, Tower of Power was getting big then. Too.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Have you watched that Summer of Soul documentary yet?
Well, I haven't seen that one.
Oh my gosh, I don't know who it's on, if it's on Hulu or Netflix or whatever, but it's all the hours and hours of footage. I know Sly and the Family Stone is on there. Did you see it, Terry? It's these yeah, it's these New York concerts. I can't remember what it was called, but it's amazing. Yeah.
I know what it is because it was, it was a festival they did.
Yeah, Sly's an
Yeah.
interesting guy. He's not quite there.
It was crazy to look at yeah, they were very interesting and
That's
just the
cool.
whole,
Yeah.
yeah, that was really cool. So good job, Rick. I think
Well,
this
thank you.
was great. Now we just have to get all of our chords working for the next one.
Yeah. I think we're just 2 chords short of
I ordered them. So,
Excellent. Fantastic.
and Kirk is down there messing with them right now, the ones that we do have, trying to make
This is-
everything work.
I love that guy. You know, this is the great thing that comes with you, Sarah, is I get another kindred spirit friend.
Ugh.
2 for the price of 1.
have him double
Totally.
connection with the microphone.
This is boring me to tears.
Yeah.
I know. I was ready to cry. So we're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, and we'll get it. We'll get it. But
So Penny, the email's going out to all of the archived contacts tomorrow morning at 8:45.
and
I
I've got
made-
ours going out at 8. Yep.
I made sure that I copied both you and Sarah on it. So
Thank you.
Sarah
Thank you.
wordsmithed a little bit more and it looks really good. So hopefully we'll generate that 75 number that'll make Jim happy.
Yes. That would
Well,
be
I
awesome.
doubt if we'll generate it tomorrow, but it will be interesting to see. It will be interesting to see what kind of a bump we get from
Mhm.
the emails, because the one's going out from Capital Crimes too, right? There's another one going
Yes,
out.
the shorter one is going out at 8 o'clock to Capital Crimes. And then, yeah, the longer one is going out to our archived contacts. And then I think that same email is what I want. And how did you PDF it? You can just, the way you,
Yeah, then the cool thing about MailerLite is there's always an option to view it either as HTML in your browser or as a PDF file. So
okay.
you can do that, and they'll give us a complete report of everybody that clicks the register button. So I don't know if that's one step. I mean, they still got to pay and all that stuff. but
Right.
we'll
But we see
know.
the
We'll know very
click-throughs if
quickly.
anybody,
Yep. We'll see open rate. We'll see all that stuff. So it'll be
Mhm.
interesting to see.
well,
And-
and my
and
thought is that's a good email to send. That's what I'm going to send to Loy, is the email that he sends out, because it has click-through buttons. It has early bird. It has all the information. So I think once you get that, Penny, if you want to send it to your committee people, and I will send it to the board and say, send this to anybody.
Disseminate it to
That's
anybody who'll
better than the
disseminate it.
graphic, because the graphic doesn't have click-throughs when you just
Okay.
send that. But if you send
Okay.
this email, then it has click-throughs, and if they can forward that, then hopefully we'll get more. So I'll send that to Loy later this week, and anybody else that we can
Okay.
think of. So
Another
Right.
thing we can do, Penny, is that we can post on the Facebook pages of our guests.
Well,
like-
Jennifer and Jessica already put together something that was ready to go, and was
Yeah.
just waiting until the 9th to go on social media. That was focusing on the giveaway. Were you thinking of something besides that, Terry?
Well, I just know that one of the things that's worked for me is now that I know Ellen's coming, Ellen Kirschman, she's a friend of mine. So I'm going to go on her thing and shout out to her buddies saying, hey, listen, if you're in Cali, Ellen's going to be in person at this thing. And you know how awesome she is. Let's come on and join me and see her, that kind of stuff. And they love that too. I mean, who of us doesn't love it when somebody jumps on our Facebook page and says,
So
You
we
know.
just tag everybody
Yep.
on the who is on the panels, or who's speaking.
That's
Right.
good. That's good. But the more you can personalize it, I mean, I put Nola Nash's Authors on the Air thing up tonight, and it's blowing up. I mean, it's going crazy because it's just me and her, and I put it on her thing, and she sent it to her street team, and you know, when you're zeroing in on the individual, they're not part of a group. They're in
Yeah.
that and
Well,
it's,
do we have graphics to send? Don't we have graphics for each person? Should we be sending those to them to put up?
Not yet, because we,
No.
remember, I sent you the little email so that we're having a blurb of each one of them each week, so
Mhm.
that we have something new on the Facebook happening on and on. But we have Jessica is working on a graphic with each speaker's name, each speaker's biopic in the center of the
cool.
magnifying glass with a little
Okay.
blurb on the side, naming their session and just a couple of things about them. That's what Chris is
Mhm.
also working on right now, putting together the blurbs to go with the graphics. So that's what we're working on. But as that was what I was talking about at the board meeting is, if you notice on the email that something's coming out, to just make it a point to go over to the dedicated page and share that onto your page and then back to our page, and then any place else you want to share it. Like if you want to send it to Kara Block, because it's, you know, it's
Mhm.
her blurb, you know, to pass it along to them so they can then spread it out on their emails. But if there's a better way to do that, I'm
Yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
there's a
learning
lot
this
of little
as we
things.
go.
It's not, and a lot of it's about how much energy we want to put into it. But I mean, one of my guerrilla tactics, you've probably seen me working Boyd Morrison here recently, because I want a blurb from him for my next Jess book. But he and his sister have written a story, a book, and I've interviewed him before on Authors on the Air, and the guy is a master of chase scenes. So what I've been doing is, you know, when I shared his stuff, I said, I wonder if there's a chase scene in this story from the master of chase scenes. And he saw it. He jumped down and he said, yeah. He says, if you think I'm good with cars and boats, wait till you see what I do with horses, you know? What happens is that stuff goes to all of their people, and
Mhm.
you may or may not, you know, it's a crapshoot. You may or may not develop a vibe, but you also don't know what can go viral. I mean, you might hit
Right.
somebody. I always link to their book on Amazon. I always pitch their stuff. So it's like, here's Ellen's coming to Sacto, you know, check out her, you know, Saving Jason, one of the most powerful cop stories I've ever read. It's your homework before you come, you know, and she'll love that. She'll probably put it in her newsletter that she's coming to see us. So I mean,
Yeah.
that, you know, if you stroke them enough, they'll
Are
do.
we asking them to do that, Penny, to promote giving the speakers things that they can use to promote with their people? Like
No,
even
we're just tagging them on what we're already
okay.
doing.
Yeah,
But
I feel uncomfortable when people do that to me when they give me stuff like that.
You don't want it, okay.
Yeah, I'm in a new anthology that's coming out at the end of the month, and the gal that's putting it together has sent me customs, you know, that her organization's created, and I won't use them.
Okay.
You know, I'll do my own,
Okay.
promote it, but it feels like, you know, what they're trying to do is use me to sell their books instead of the honor.
that's
of
exactly
me.
what they're doing, but and we are too, but we don't want it to be that obvious.
Yeah,
We would like to just stroke their egos enough that they want to turn around and promote it on
That's
there.
it. Yep. I mean,
You
it's the
know.
old Keith Ferrazzi thing. I mean,
Right.
the only way that you get somebody to give back to you is by giving without expectation
Yeah.
of return. So if they believe in our authenticity of our appreciation of them, they're going to pay it back. As you know, the Greg's going to be fantastic. I'm so glad he's coming. That's going to be, you know, I'd fly out there just to sit on the stage with him. He's going to be fantastic.
Well, it helps that you've already interviewed them, that you already have a relationship.
Yeah. Do you guys know him? I mean, he's really an amazing guy.
James has a picture of his daughter with him. From
Yeah,
the
I mean,
signing.
He's
Oh.
terrific.
Remember, he was talking about it when we were at the bank.
Yeah, I mean, he's a true rock star in publishing. I mean, the guy
Okay.
is. So you guys have done for him to be our keynote is a big deal.
Yeah. Good.
It moves
Good,
it up to a new level. Anyway, that's my marketing advice for you.
All right.
Terry, isn't it that I thought your marketing advice was all you need is sincerity, and once you can fake that, you've got it made.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But you know, the thing is, it's easy to fall in love with the good things about people, you know, like if I look deep enough in any of this is the thing that, I mean, you guys as my friends in the author community have literally saved my life. So, I mean, I feel a connection and a gratitude to you guys that I can never fully repay. But, you know, when you look out there and see these other, I love these, you know, like Cindy's new book. I don't know her that well, but I mean, I bought it, I read it, I'm giving it love. And when she jumped on, that was the first thing I said tonight. And, you know, when it feels good for the giver, but there's payback on that stuff. I mean, she's going to remember that. And our
Well,
guest
and
will too.
the thing is, you don't knowing Cindy has been a member of Capital Crimes forever. I mean, she was on the board at one point in the early days, but I have a special admiration for cancer survivors and people who manage to come through the other side of that, still writing and still intact. I mean, you know, I would, you know, bow down and give her kudos just for that, let alone that she's still out there and she's writing and she's doing you know, it's got to be scary for somebody who has come from an immune compromised position to go out and do a book signing face to face, you know, I mean, I got all kinds of it's easy to give love to somebody that you have admiration for.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, that's my wife shouldn't be alive today. She's a 3-time cancer survivor. Yes, but the thing about the irony of some of those people is that Cindy would be the last one to get sick. I mean, Colleen is immunocompromised. We went up to my sister's funeral. We both came back with COVID before they knew it was COVID. Yeah. She was down for 4 days. I was down for 2 months. And, you know, she's the one who's touching. So that, you know, I love. Now, thank you for telling me about that. I did not know that about Cindy. And that's another thing that we have in common. So that's what you look for, right? It's just, it's that little stuff, because you never know what thing you say is going to be the trigger that will turn them from somebody that's doing you a favor by showing up to this thing to somebody's totally bought in.
Right. So you guys should definitely read Laura Jensen Walker's books, because oh gosh, what are they called? The Deadly Delights books, because she is a cancer survivor, breast cancer. And her main character is a breast cancer survivor.
Okay.
You should read the
And she's next, right? You're interviewing.
Wait.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, cool.
Yes.
I'm on her website right now. I'm going to buy her stuff. Great.
So
Thank you, Jennifer.
We're going from a cozy to a cozy real fast.
Yeah.
It's a cozy. Yes, it is a cozy.
That is good. We need to balance it out.
Yeah.
We need a cozy. After you get finished reading the Baker Boys, you need a cozy. You need something to cleanse the palate after that.
Exactly.
And a wonderful piece of writing. Oh my God, intense. So,
yeah, it is. It is. It's not a fun book to read, but
there hasn't been a Dateline show yet, a Dateline episode, or 48 Hours or something.
I know, or something, a podcast. It seems like it should be out there. Yeah, that is
really
crazy stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem in like right now, is that there are things that are happening in the world that are actually bigger than that.
Yeah.
The way the news guys work is they try and find the story of the day that's going to catch people's attention. And when gas is what it is and all this horrible stuff going on in Europe, it's hard to break through that message.
Yeah.
Hard to break through anything. Well, thank you guys. This was a long day's work of Capital Crimes, but yay.